Welcome everyone to another episode of RadialSpark Radio. With us today, you got our co-host Justin Ludlow, myself, Michael Rockford, and of course the DJ in the background, Peyton Gherkin, who's making this stream possible. How is everyone doing today?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
Yeah, not bad for a Monday. I mean, a little chaotic morning, but can't complain.
Awesome. Well, hey, we've got a special episode today. I know normally we end up have a little bit of a free form format where we're talking about some news articles, and then we have an article of our own that we want to really dive into, the specific. However, today we're going to do the latter, and we're going to focus on a particular question that continues to come up in our experience over the last about year and a half. And that question is, what is data cloud? Justin has put together an article that goes over what data cloud is, what it's not, where it fits in the Salesforce ecosystem, and really just is out there to demystify what this new tool is. And I think this is an important episode for a lot of people out there that are looking at acquiring data cloud, have already acquired it, and also for Salesforce AEs that are trying to figure out when and where to position this in your opportunities coming up. This is something that I think, just to be frank, is a little bit misunderstood in the industry. It's an exceptionally powerful tool, and we want to go over where its power resides and what the limits are and why they exist. So Justin, without further ado, I want to pass the ball to you, since you're the one that pretty much drove this article here. This has been like your brainchild front to back, unlike some of the other ones that we've kind of collaborated on. So Justin, take it away. Demystify data cloud for us.
Absolutely. And I am proud of the title there. I like that alliteration. Before I dive into the article itself, I wanted to touch on something you said there and kind of, I guess, briefly explain why I wanted to write this article and have us talk about it. And it is a bit what you said. With some of the people that we talk to in our day-to-day, like work processes, whether these be partners, other customers, things like that, I've noticed that like opinions on data cloud seem to be heavily divided one way or another. There are some people that have basically accused it of like being vaporware or not delivering on its promise, and there are other people that have loved it. They're like, this thing solved our need, it met the goal. And I spent some time just to myself thinking about like, why is that happening? Like, because odds are the truth isn't both. It's something that's causing people to have both great and not so great experiences. And I think it comes down to a bit of a lack of understanding on exactly what data cloud is, what it wants to be, and where it fits in your technology stack. And that's why I wanted to dive into this. So in here, before I start laying it out, the other thing I do want to call out here is data cloud, unlike the platform cloud, Force.com platform, they are rapidly developing this product, rolling out new features on monthly releases. So this is a rapidly growing product. It is a changing animal. So as of the time that we've released this article, basically last week, this information is up to date. By the time some of you may be watching this, checking in later, there could be some updates, some things to go on. As I touch on some features that were literally changing as I was writing this article, I will call those out, but just something for everybody to keep in mind as we go through this.
Yeah, and that's not to say that Salesforce doesn't update its core Force.com platform, not to correct what Justin said there, but rather just to add some clarity. Salesforce is traditionally on a triannual basis for their updates. So every 4 months, there's another major update that they'll do. Spring, summer, fall, spring, summer, winter, rather, is usually the cycles you have to do. If you guys are familiar with getting certifications, those are the ones you have to do. Yeah. And that tends to be the release schedule. Data Cloud is not in, I imagine at some point it'll get to
somewhere like that, yeah.
But it's in a rapid development cycle. And you're actually seeing some of that with some of the other products that are out there too. MuleSoft is a little bit off cadence. Heroku is a little bit faster than you see. Force.com is on a very steady pipeline. So this is
Yeah,
something
that's
that
a good call out, because I definitely didn't mean to imply that Salesforce doesn't update the core platform. It's noteworthy, and I think even outside the Salesforce ecosystem, the fact that these guys are doing feature releases monthly, because the big new features that come out on the Salesforce platform, those come out as part of those triannual releases. They're like, hey, coming summer 2025, you can look forward to this. So the fact that these guys are like, June, July, August, this just came out. It's honestly impressive, but it does mean that as you're looking at reference material, things like that, you have to be double checking the publication dates because stuff changes quickly. Anyway, so without further ado, let's demystify Data Cloud.
Yeah. So Justin, what is Data Cloud? Like, let's start there. What is it?
So, and I kind of hit this like just right into it in the article, but Data Cloud's a data lake. And I think it's important to say that, because part of where I believe like some of the mixed responses to Data Cloud have been is like some uncertainty as to like, is Data Cloud a data lake? Is it an integration platform? A lot of the people I've spoken to that have a less positive opinion on Data Cloud, they have talked about it looking at it as an integration platform. Whereas a lot of the people that have had great experiences with Data Cloud talk about using it as a data lake. And so I guess right there, banner item for the article and what we want to get to is Data Cloud is first and foremost a data lake. And while it has a lot of connectivity options, it is not an integration platform. So if you're looking at Data Cloud and you're like, oh, this is my replacement for MuleSoft or for take your pick of iPass, you're probably going to have a rough experience with it. It's not an ETL tool. It's not like a Celigo or something like that. You should really think of Data Cloud almost more like an alternative to Snowflake or something on that field.
So how did that come about? Because you look at some data lakes, like again, you've got AWS and Snowflake. Microsoft has their version. Like Oracle's got theirs, right? They've got homegrown data lakes as well. What leads to that misconstruction of like Data Cloud being a data lake? Because as you mentioned, you kind of gloss over it too, is that, well, you know, it has a lot of point-to-point integrations. Like you can do some data manipulation in there. Why is Data Cloud not integration first tool?
Well, I mean, so from a technology standpoint, part of it is its origins. You know, Data Cloud was built off of the skeleton of Marketing Cloud Customer Data Platform, or CDP, for those of you that are familiar with the abbreviation. And Marketing Cloud CDP was effectively a marketing-centered mini data lake. It was the idea of, let me take your sales data, your service data, your ERP data, whatever your different systems are, get it all in one place so that I had a unified profile of the people I'm marketing to, and I could use that in my journey builder, in my what have you, to create truly personalized and engaging marketing campaigns. And so we're seeing a lot of that skeleton still present in the product. And to that end, the other part I want to talk about is like, why make a data lake, right? Because you talked about there is Snowflake. There are a bunch of existing data lake products out there. Why does Salesforce have an interest in pursuing this? And I think one of the more unique parts about this, and also maybe a little bit inspired by what Marketing Cloud did with CDP, is the idea of a CRM accessible data lake, something that enrichment of your CRM data from your data lake is a first party feature. It's not like, oh, hey, we have a data lake, let me build some kind of integration that works around traditional data lake limitations to get data out and then bring that into my CRM and do custom enrichments. The idea is this is a data lake to put all of your data into so that it is very easily accessible to Salesforce in a multitude of ways so it can enrich your CRM data. Because as we all know, the Salesforce ecosystem is at its core centered around the Salesforce platform. And so anything that helps enable getting value out of that is going to be a big part of their mission statement.
Right. So how, like, again, like, and I think that gives us a good overview of what Data Cloud, where it came from, what it is, what its core purpose is. But we've been on several calls where people are upset because of the mismatch of expectations. Why is data lake confused with some of these? I don't want to say confused, like they don't know what it is. Like I think they kind of know that it has to do with data and storing data and doing data enrichment. Like those are all core features. But how are people falling into the trap that it's like, oh, well, I can use this for like all of my ETL and most of my integrations and all this, because these are the customers that we're talking to that are just, falling on, face planting down, like when they're trying to get started with this. Like, wait a minute, like I was told I can integrate a bunch of these tools. Like I've got Data Cloud integrates with this, and this, like 10 different systems. Why doesn't it work the way I want? So what's happening?
I think there's a couple things at play there. So one, Data Cloud, and everybody, like my team here, us on the broadcast, we're intimately familiar with the complexities of selling a highly technical product within the Salesforce ecosystem. For any Salesforce customers listening along, you guys are probably very familiar with the fact that like Salesforce's pitch strategy is centered around business use cases. They're trying to identify your business use case that they can match to a product and pitch that story exactly, because it's the clearest way to convey value and it's the easiest way to close a sale. Us technical nerds that like selling Heroku, things like that, that's a horizontal product. It doesn't meet a singular need. It's like buying AWS. It is buying AWS. You build whatever you want to in it. And data lakes, by virtue of being data lakes, tend to be more horizontal products. And Salesforce is starting putting together, like, I think I've read maybe 13 different use cases that they have for tying in CRM enrichment from their Data Cloud data lake. But all of that, I think, lends itself to our understanding of this ecosystem where, use case selling triumphs. So selling to the actual technical merits or the underlying technology of the product is not what Salesforce does first and foremost. So I want to call that out as part of my answer, and then talk about another one of Data Cloud's unique features, which I think contributes to the confusion when you look at it through that lens. And it's the fact that they have gone to great lengths to make it very easy to aggregate data into Data Cloud, because if CRM enrichment is going to be a primary value proposition of Data Cloud, CRM enrichment needs data to drive it. You need to have better data coming from somewhere, which means the easier it is to get data in there, the better. What does that mean? That means a suite of connectors that support touching on a whole bunch of different systems. This is like MuleSoft having their connector. So any MuleSoft API, web that you've made, you can have a Data Cloud connector to start pushing data from any of those systems into Data Cloud. They have native integrations they're rolling out with Heroku and Heroku Postgres, something we're very personally excited about. They have direct connectors to a bunch of common IT systems as well, including Salesforce, and supporting, multiple orgs connecting to multiple different Salesforce orgs. The miss, or the gotcha, if you will, is that most of these connectors are only for data ingestion. They're unidirectional. So it's, I'm reaching out to you to get your data and put it in my data lake.
And so I think the thing
that integration, that's collection or aggregation.
Well, and I think the thing that you said, to sum that up very succinctly, is that Data Cloud's key failing as an integration platform is that it's greedy. Like, it wants all the data, it wants it in its format, it wants to enrich the Salesforce CRM data. It is not caring about anyone else downstream.
But
is that effectively right? Is it very short and succinct?
No, what you said is 100% right, but I want to play devil's advocate for Data Cloud here for a second and say it should be. I mean, think about what the data lake is, right? Data lakes are not distribution centers. They're not data warehouses.
Justin, hold up. So that was my point, though, is that we're trying to, my question was, why are people misconstruing what Data Cloud is? Like, if you look at it as an integration platform, like what you just said, is that it's really great in ingestion, which is one part of an integration platform. The distribution thereof, outside of CRM, it's terrible at. Like, it's good at distributing it back to your CRM, the one CRM you're connected to,
Wow.
but not all
And
the
this
other
is
ones.
one of these areas where I've got a bit of an asterisk for you, because it does have some features. Its CRM enrichment is best for the host CRM org. It does have the ability to do some distribution out to other Salesforce orgs, but then there are limits on that as well. And this is what we touch on in this article to talk about those pieces. So
Before you go on more,
go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like, again, I think this comes down to summarize this and why people might be having heartburn on Data Cloud, whether they purchased it or confused about buying it or whatnot, is that people are looking, it's just like you wrong tool, wrong job, right? Like you're looking at a hammer and you're trying to use it as a screwdriver and you're like, well, this isn't working very well. And you're like, well, yeah, it's driving the screw straight into the drywall, but it's like screwing up my drywall. You're like, well, yeah, but it's really good as a hammer. Which is what you're trying to say. It's a very great hammer. It's just a horrible screwdriver. And I think that's the thing that I wanted to highlight here is that, like, because we talk about what it isn't, and you're going to go into the details of what it does really well in terms of the ingestion. But I think for everyone out there that is trying to figure this out, like, where does Data Cloud fit into their stack? Is the short version is that it is, as Justin said, a data lake. It wants to hold data. It wants to aggregate data. That is its goal. It does have some distribution capabilities. It does link to your CRM. That's the whole point. It's enriching your CRM. Yeah. And it's built around that premise, especially in particular around marketing data enrichment, maybe some customer service data enrichment, but really from that that's its origins, that's its DNA. If you start going outside of that, I think Justin's going to go through here and explain, here's some of the art of the possible that we can do with it, but you got to remember where it's came from and where it's laser focused, because at least from what I've seen with a lot of the release notes, they're very focused on that marketing aspect. They're very focused on the aggregation and enrichment aspect. They've added some features for downstream pushing data, but again, Salesforce owns MuleSoft. Salesforce owns Heroku. It doesn't need to solve for those problems. Like, there's bigger tools in the toolkit that are purpose-built.
Data Cloud does not want to become the next Databricks, for instance.
Right.
It's not worth it. In fact, they integrate with Databricks. So.
Right. So what's Databricks? For those of you who don't know, like, what is Databricks? Like, what?
So Databricks is basically like a comprehensive like data repository and integration platform. It's all about data consolidation, connectivity. So you're taking all your different disparate systems and you're building effectively a combined data model in a non-SQL database style environment where you can take all this data from all these different systems and build a single business semantic data model out of these quote unquote data bricks, where each sub data model driven by an external system is a brick in your overall data model, and you start tying them together, reconciling them, and feeding them through. For large scale enterprise with very complicated IT landscapes, it's an extremely powerful tool. And that's their main value proposition. That's what they go for. They're not here to be like, hey, our goal is an insane amount of AI enrichment or other things like that. Like, their goal is data connectivity and data consolidation and keeping the meaning of that data highly accessible when you have to represent it or have it present in a large multitude of different systems. So that's a primary driving mission statement for them.
Yeah, so let's talk about this then. So we talked about what Data Cloud is at a high level and where people have been kind of tripping over what it, like, based on some features it does do, they're potentially misusing the tool or misunderstanding where it fits in. So why don't you paint us a picture? Where does Data Cloud excel? Like, where do you see it as like this is the key use case? Here's where it kicks butt. Here's the roadmap that I've seen that they're outlining. Here are the features that are coming out to make this better, even at this. Like, where is Data Cloud's place in the Salesforce ecosystem?
Exactly. Well, and to that end, I would say, like, if you've bought into the Salesforce ecosystem, if you live it, you love it, Data Cloud is, I think, the data lake for you, because
all right. So why? Hit us up. Like,
so one, the aggregation, like all the connectors that are there, it is extremely easy to get all your data from all your other ecosystem products in there. And then because it has those tools through like MuleSoft or the ability to connect to Heroku, anything they don't have a first-party connector for, you can pretty easily build an integration to get that data into either MuleSoft or Heroku and then pull it into Data Cloud from
Or
there.
straight to Salesforce too. Like you could also like
Yeah,
pull in those integrations.
absolutely.
Okay.
Two, the AI enabled feature sets that they're rolling out. So they are making Data Cloud very AI accessible so that AI can like basically scroll through all the data in your data lake and provide insights based on
because Data Cloud at its heart is a vectorized database that's AI optimized, correct?
Yes. And
Okay.
so that's why anybody who went to like TDX and saw like everything with Model Builder and all the stuff they're rolling out under the continuing to grow Einstein brand, and now GPT becoming a bigger part of that vector database is also rolling out on Heroku. Like there's a big drive to make all of your data in this ecosystem AI accessible. So the fact that they're designing this in from the get-go means that if you've got AI use cases you're looking to drive on data, why not drive it on your aggregated data in your data lake? It's again, it's going to be the most coherent. You will have unified your data by individuals. So now the insights that your AI is generating are definitely being reconciled correctly against the people you're using them with. And then two, the CRM enrichment piece, because having these insights, having this aggregated data, like it's a great thing, but you want to put it where your boots on the ground are doing the work so that they can actually leverage this. And I was actually going to say, like you touched on it, the tripping point for some people with Data Cloud is they misunderstand the distribution capabilities. And it's because the CRM enrichment capabilities are so good that you can mistake them for distribution. You're like, oh, I can do all this stuff and then push all the data back out. And it's like, yes, asterisk, in very specific certain ways that are easy to use and seamless, but you can't push that data anywhere just with Data Cloud on its own.
So go over the best use case. So we're pushing into the source org, right? Like so the connected primary org, Salesforce org that Data Cloud's hooked up to. Walk us through
the host org.
The host org, right?
To give us the vocabulary.
Yeah. So the host org that Data Cloud's connected to, why is it so good? What does it do that like third-party data lakes don't really do out of the box? Like Snowflake as an example. Like what is it like? What is leading people down this path that it's so good at?
So let's talk about some of these like CRM enrichment features that surface Data Cloud data in that host org. And I'm going to actually start with some features that are exclusive to the host org. And this is like, again, one of those asterisks that are important. So copy fields and related lists. Data Cloud copy fields, like what that is you can take any data point from a Data Cloud data model object or a calculated insight object, and you can map that to a field on, say, a contact or a lead. And this is actually, we'll call it my double asterisk that I called out earlier. When I started writing this article, copy fields were only available on leads and contacts. And literally as of, I believe it was last month, you can now roll out copy fields on most standard and custom objects on the Salesforce.com platform. So this is like one of those like monthly feature releases. Like if you're paying close attention, you'll realize what a big deal this is. But the idea that you can basically say, take my data from everywhere, aggregate it, reconcile it, unify like my understanding of, let's say a person, like, oh, I realized they got married in one system, I have their new last name. That all bubbles up in Data Cloud, the updated last name wins. I can use copy fields to say, Data Cloud's understanding of the last name is the best understanding. Save that over whatever I have in my Sales Cloud. Like I just want to make sure that I'm getting the best data after everything's aggregated. So you're overriding what's in your Salesforce, and there's something to be understood there. It's not a separate field unless you're creating one in Salesforce for it. When you configure the copy field, you're taking an existing field and you're saying, I want Data Cloud's data to overwrite this. but it will handle that and it will keep it up to date on a schedule. So like, let's say you have even a feedback loop potentially that you're putting in, you're feeding in your Sales Cloud data, you're feeding in your ERP data, you're feeding in whatever, and you're getting a very comprehensive and refined understanding of who an individual is. And then you say, okay, now that Data Cloud has figured out exactly who this person is based on all of my data, now write over what's in Sales Cloud based on that to give Sales Cloud the best possible version of that data.
Okay, that makes sense. And just to be clear, these copy fields and because you call both of them objects, and just so everyone's in the same vocabulary, like objects, tables, like can we use
the data model
interchangeable?
objects and the CIOs. So
Yeah.
the data model objects and the calculated insight objects, those are Data Cloud data constructs. Like they live in Data Cloud. Those are not Salesforce.
They're not in Salesforce.
They're not native. Yeah, that does not count against like your force.com storage limits the way an S object would.
Okay, but it's important. It's important to call out
Data Cloud data.
Yeah, but
The
it's important to
copy
call.
field is a native S object field.
But the
Because
copy
we're
field is
writing it from Data Cloud into Salesforce now, like traditional Salesforce.
But the important call out that I was driving at is that the Data Cloud aggregated data model is not one-to-one to the host org.
And that's why one of the big things that like you used to have to deal with, and this is becoming less of a requirement as they're rolling out the expanded support, but like copy fields were only available on leads and contacts, and you had to have done all the mapping and the reconciliation to a unified individual profile or a unified account profile to basically say, here is my person, and that person is either a lead or contact, and now I can map fields from the unified profile or the related objects to that person. Because everything, and this is like where CDP's bones are showing a little bit, everything is going back to that understanding of who an individual is once you've reconciled everything. So it isn't one-to-one. Like the fact that you even call it a unified individual, that's letting you know like, oh, there's so many different versions of this I'm pulling from all my different systems. Each version continues to live, but then I set up rules that determine which data wins when there's conflicts. How does this come in to create my unified version? And then once I have that and I reconcile that to Salesforce, I say, okay, from all the different versions, all the different related records, how do I want to map that data? It's not one-to-one. You have to handle that. And that's actually where another host exclusive feature comes in, which is Data Cloud related lists. And this is where when you have one-to-many data against a unified profile, let's say individual or account, you can say, oh, I've got engagement history, and this is spanning maybe both marketing and fulfillment, and I'd like to have a related list, you know, maybe to kind of like replace the activity feed, if you will, native in Salesforce. I want to see all the actions taken with this individual, whether it's marketing, whether it's fulfillment, chronologically. So that related list is what gives you the ability to have that one-to-many data set and look at, say, an account or a contact or a lead, and then pull up the related list of all those interactions that happen from what you have in Data Cloud. And again, it's that related list. Those are not standard S objects. That does not go against your Salesforce data storage. Those are Data Cloud objects that are being exposed as a related list in Salesforce. And again, because both of these things are being driven off of Data Cloud native data and then either being virtualized alongside Salesforce native data or copied into it, that's why these particular feature sets are currently exclusive to the host Salesforce org, because they are playing on that close coupling with the metadata API to facilitate some of this. Now, there's another more complex, but also much more flexible CRM enrichment or data surfacing tool, and this is going to be Data Cloud triggered flow.
Well, before we go into the automation,
it sounds like you got something.
Yeah, so before we go into the automation, so we talk about so let's just talk about the field and data that we're getting into the host org. Like we've got the copy fields you just talked about, which is now it's actually really huge because it was a huge limitation just to have it only on lead and contact. Now now you don't have Data Cloud doesn't have to be focused on marketing, so to speak. You can use it for other use cases without having to do a bunch of custom development, which is amazing to be able to bring the copy field data in. When you talk about related lists and Data Cloud being able to dynamically choose like what other objects are related, why is this super important? Like, especially now that they've opened this up for beyond leading contact, like what's the use case that you've heard? Like why is this a big deal?
So I think a great example of this, for instance, is there are a lot of people that build, I'm going to call them point integrations to surface use cases that you'll now be able to get directly out of your data lake. So like this is actually a use case that we've seen in our partnership with Celigo in the past. You sell something in Salesforce. Let's say you're a company that sells widgets. You sell 5,000 widgets to a customer. So you have your opportunity that goes into a close one state in Salesforce, and you're using, let's say, NetSuite or something as your ERP for fulfillment. So that closed one opportunity is now becoming a sales order in NetSuite. That sales order is potentially going to have multiple fulfillments. You might not have all 5,000 widgets ready to ship to them in one go. So you're sending them multiple shipments to get all 5,000 widgets delivered to them. You're tracking the delivery status of each of those widgets, and then you're also sending invoicing for each of the deliveries to get paid as the product is delivered. And so everybody in sales is probably going to be curious to see, like, especially like, let's say commissions are based on when the company gets paid. It's like, hey, have you shipped the stuff I sold them yet? How much of it have you shipped? Have we been paid for it yet? So we see a lot of dedicated integrations where it's like, okay, we're going from a close one opportunity to a sales order with a bunch of related fulfillment and invoicing data. And the sales team might have an interest in seeing that fulfillment and invoicing data. So then you have to integrate that back and create records in Salesforce related to the opportunity to see all that status. With this, you don't need to do that anymore. Now you're like, I have my data lake. All my sales data is going into my data lake. I connect my NetSuite to the data lake, and I'm bringing in all the invoices and all of the fulfillment records. And then I can relate all of that together in the data lake and then say, hey, give me the related list of the invoices of the shipping fulfillments tied to these IDs. Like, here's how you're going to reconcile that with my org. So this key corresponds to this opportunity. And now you're not shuffling data between your ERP and your CRM on a, I'm going to call it a record by record basis. You know, as you close a sale, you then have to migrate invoicing and fulfillment data as it's created back to the CRM for your sales team to see it. Like, no, everything goes to your data lake because everything should be going to your data lake. And then your CRM just pulls that data from the data lake at an interval to be able to surface that, and not just for each individual instance, but for all opportunities, because it's all there.
Okay, cool. So then I guess that this is like the one thing where I think people get tripped up, is because it's all supposed to be going to your data lake, but it's going from CRM to ERP, CRM to data lake, ERP to data lake to CRM. And that's when it's like, oh, well, I can just run everything through this integration process, and now we kind of come back full circle.
But again, because Data Cloud's not meant to be like a business operations integration platform. It's not doing this, then that logic cross system. It is a data aggregator. It's a data lake. So you want to put all your data from all your systems into it, which makes it a great place to then pull data back out of. But if you've got a cross system business process, you're still talking about a MuleSoft integration or a point-to-point integration or something like that.
Right, and that's what I wanted to call out, because it's like the power of this is that I'm able to consolidate, like, let's say there's multiple downstream systems in order to fulfill an order, and that, like, you know, from accounting to payroll to, you know, ERP data, shipping data, whatever it is, right? You know, it's like I got a complex landscape. If it's all funneling into my data lake, I don't have to have 16 point solutions in order to see the data. Like, I just have my data lake. But if I need to have operational data, and what I mean by that is like, hey, this is my sales team, I now need to execute some sort of workflow modify this data and make sure it goes back in that format to my downstream system, you're not running that through the data lake. The data lake is just, hey, dude, this is what it looks like. This is the status now.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way to
It is.
articulate it?
And I would say the timeliness is part of it as well, right? Because like when you're executing a business process, you are handing off data, but you're also triggering automations, and there might be SLAs or response times as part of that. So it's not a, oh, let me go put my data in the universal spot and they'll get it when they're ready. You're handing off data, and as part of that, you're probably alerting something, triggering something, doing something. So you're going to have your dedicated endpoint that fires that off, or your business process that's built. And so those business process handoffs that are a combination of data and automation and notification, that's never been the problem that a data lake is trying to solve.
So, but Data Cloud does solve it to a certain extent inside the host CRM, right? Like,
well, and across some connected CRMs. Again,
okay, so let's
talk asterisks, constant updates to the product.
Yeah, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about the automation it can do. Like, what is it good at in terms of doing that business process automation?
So Data Cloud triggered flows. And for anybody who's used Flow Builder before, this is basically a record triggered flow where the record is inside of Data Cloud. So you're picking your data space, you're picking what you're looking at, and you're saying, hey, when this thing changes on a DMO or a CIO, that's a data model object or calculated insight object. I'll keep repeating that till everybody gets comfortable with the lingo. When you detect a change in Data Cloud, then you can fire what's called a data action in Data Cloud, which would key up a Data Cloud triggered flow, which is then a native Salesforce flow that can receive that data, query native Salesforce data, create native Salesforce data. So all the things you would typically do in a flow builder flow, you can do in a Data Cloud triggered flow, but your kickoff point is something that's native to Data Cloud. Now, this is where I was saying we get some cross-org functionality. Using these data actions, these Data Cloud data actions, you can trigger flows in other connected Salesforce orgs. So this is like the one most complicated and most flexible CRM enrichment tool we have. And it's also, I think, one of the only ones that's actually effective outside of the host Salesforce org. Now, something to keep in mind as people look at Data Cloud and look at this, like data actions are a monetized resource in Data Cloud, like part of your subscription, what you're buying, and data actions are consumed by copy fields and related lists, as well as these Data Cloud triggered flows. So depending on how often you're running this is part of the reason why Data Cloud's not necessarily meant to be business operations automation, is because there is a scaling cost
so
every flow you trigger.
So that's a good call out. So when we're looking at this and people are like, listen, I don't want to buy like 10 solutions. I just want Data Cloud to do it. Which may or may not be possible, but let's say it is. Like, it's like this is something that can be done. And they want to use some of these business process automation that you outlined. If they're doing it at a high level, like 10, 20, 30,000 foot level, like type of thing, where they're like taking the aggregated data and every once in a while they're triggering some updates, once a week, once a month, like, mild cadence.
Daily is fine.
Or even daily, right? Some mild cadence. But if they're like, listen, we're shipping, 10,000 products an hour, and like we're constantly shooting updates back and forth, and depending on what happens, this gets triggered over here, and and if you put Data Cloud in the middle of that with its copy fields and its automation, like it's going to get very expensive very quick, right?
It can get very expensive very quickly.
So you got
to think, most Salesforce customers, the majority of Salesforce customers have more than one Salesforce org. So the copy fields and the related lists are only going to solve the problem in one org, the org where Data Cloud is hosted. All the other CRM enrichment for the other orgs is going to have to be done through the Data Cloud triggered flows. So like, it's like, okay, well, I have 2 Salesforce orgs. I'm going to lean on the Data Cloud triggered flows, use my data actions, and I'll do enrichment using identical flows in both orgs to have consistent design or something. You're like, okay, cool, cool. But like, we've seen customers with 50 to 60 Salesforce orgs. So it's like all of a sudden you want to do that same enrichment across all of those orgs. So for each enrichment, like to send that one data enrichment, you're now going to have to use multiple actions, like to push out to every org to do each thing and to have potentially a slightly different flavor of it for each org. Like that's where
well,
the
I think the
scaling
50 to
can become
60
bit
is
of
a
challenge.
rare use case, but having 2 or 3, even 3, it starts getting really complicated and potentially even brittle when you're trying to do that orchestration. And again, I think that the cool thing here to talk about, the highlight, is that, again, this is a relatively new feature for Data Cloud, is that you can actually do this, but it always comes down to, should you do it? Like Salesforce is so good at giving you tools in which you can really hurt yourself. Like it's like extremely powerful tool.
Salesforce will probably get a little mad at me for what I'm about to say, but I think like best possible experience with Data Cloud, what you want to do is you use all the aggregation tools, you get all the data in, you mount your AI, you get your insights, you do your pieces, you use your copy fields and your related lists in your host org, use Data Cloud triggered flows in your host org. And this is something that they even call out in their own documentation. It's like, once you've used Data Cloud triggered flows or copy fields to take that Data Cloud native data and in some way surface it as native Salesforce data, whether you've just overwritten it on the field, whether you used a Data Cloud triggered flow to create a new record or update an existing record, like once that data is there, now all of the integration like patterns that you know and love for native Salesforce data to other systems, that's all applicable now. So now you're like, okay, we've been doing integrations with Heroku through Heroku Connect. Well, once that data is on Salesforce objects, Heroku connect it out to Postgres, have all your various integrations there, do your thing. You've got MuleSoft APIs that are pushing this data around. Once you've surfaced this data in Salesforce, any of that Salesforce data accessible to the MuleSoft APIs, you can now pass it through your MuleSoft API web.
So the short version is, Justin, is that when you're looking at this and what Salesforce, like if you're a Salesforce customer or an AE, Data Cloud is not a panacea. Like if for integrations, like even with these new feature updates, because if you try to do this, like you're going to blow the budget, like it's going to get too expensive, and it's probably not optimal either way because it wasn't built with that in mind. Is that the fair understanding?
Step back, right? Because we've been talking about this, and I've been talking about quote unquote distribution capabilities. But again, This is CRM enrichment. Everything we've talked about only works in a Salesforce org. So like, if you want to distribute your data lake data back to a NetSuite, an SAP, a whatever that is not a Salesforce org, none of these tools do that. And that's where that more comprehensive integration solution comes into play. And so I think I guess
the other thing too is that when you're and that's the thing. It's like, I know there's a bunch of people out there going like, hey, wait, but it goes to a Salesforce org, and my Salesforce org has a bunch of integrations. So I'll just funnel the data through my Salesforce org as a hub and shove that out to other systems, which then comes to a lot of problems when you're trying to use Salesforce itself almost as a data lake to pass Data Cloud data through everywhere. Because yes, it can integrate. Yes, it has some tools.
3 words: inbound API limits.
Yeah. Well, even if it's outbound, like if it's constantly sending the data out.
Oh yeah.
Like it's still like not necessarily. It's what you like to call an anti-pattern, right?
Yes.
And I think the core thing that you said there that I want to highlight is that after you've done the automation in your host CRM org, all of your other favorite integration strategies are still valid. Like that's effectively what you said. So if you're looking at, well, I have this and I have a point integration over here that's been working great. Now that I've added Data Cloud on top, I've enriched my data and I'm still sending this stuff to my point integration, which then may be feeding back up to my Data Cloud because it can. That's working. I've got MuleSoft over here connecting all these other systems from my CRM. Some of them not even touching my CRM directly. And then I'm adding that Data Cloud connection. That all still works fine. Like all of those patterns, you don't need to like throw all that out to make Data Cloud work. And in fact, it's best practice to not do that. Like if you have a data cleansing tool, if you have a if you have a staging database where you're monitoring a lot of these changes before it gets into your primary data lake to be distributed across multiple systems, and leveraging MuleSoft, all that stuff, all those strategies are still relevant. It's not like, oh, Data Cloud, here's the magic elixir, it solves the problem, we don't need any of this stuff anymore. That's not what it's there to do. And I think where people get confused is because it's so good with the Data Cloud to CRM piece, and like we try to live and breathe inside Salesforce, right? Like as much as possible for many business use cases. Like we don't want a swivel chair. We want the data available in Salesforce. We want it actually in Salesforce, or we at least want to see it, and we want our customers interacting with it. We want our websites tied to it. We want one place to go to figure out how to operate our business and what we're doing. And even though Salesforce isn't the perfect tool for all that, it's really good at doing a lot of the things. So it often becomes the hub in a hub and spoke model for business users, the first place to go to do their jobs, right? And even though you have these other downstream systems that exist, we're now looking at Data Cloud and go like, oh wow, Data Cloud just instantly updates my CRM. This is perfect. I don't need the rest of this stuff. You're like, whoa, slow down. Kind of yes and no for certain things. Like you might be able to retire certain integrations, certain point integrations that you've talked about too, where you might be able to retire those in favor of just using Data Cloud and some of this automation. But it's like you said, asterisk, double asterisk, triple asterisk, depending on your use case, depending on your actual feature.
If you don't mind, let me pull up a sticky example. And this is something we've actually seen in some of our, like, our services sales that we do with Salesforce. We have our multi-org data sharing architecture that we've rolled out for a lot of customers, very heavily invested on the Heroku front there in terms of bringing data together, combining it, then surfacing the combined data back to both orgs in a way that like they can see that, act on it, report on it, not necessarily change the other org's data because you don't want that, potentially control what gets exposed. And something that we've heard from the Data Cloud teams or certain sales team members in Data Cloud's early sales push was like, well, Data Cloud can do this, we don't need that architecture anymore. Well, it's like, well, can it actually do what we do? Because what we do in our data sharing, right, is take the native data from both orgs, sync it into like a single data repository, combine that data, and then expose the combined data to both orgs as external objects. We also provide a filtering functionality to say you can control if there's data that you don't want in that combined data pool, whether that's for compliance reasons or like trust reasons in terms of like you've got business units that work with each other's competitors, things like that. Like we have all that in there and we bring that data back. If we talk about what we're looking at here, so one, if you try to replace that with Data Cloud, it's not Heroku as its own standalone node between two Salesforce orgs. This Data Cloud is going to live alongside one of them. And that means that one org that has Data Cloud could potentially use copy fields or related lists. And if they use copy fields, this isn't, oh, hey, you can see the other org's version of the data or this, that, or the other. It's we're going to write over your data with what's in Data Cloud. So it's going to replace the native data. And this is something that we, very heavily talk to in our data sharing pitches. We're like, the golden record is an ideal to strive for, but it's not something you rush into, because if you shoehorn an entire organization into a singular view of a data point or an entity before they're ready, you disrupt the operations of the boots on the ground. They no longer can find accounts because you change their name. That slows down opportunity cycles. It causes other issues. It's a much better thing to say, hey, everybody gets to have their own special version of this that they know and love, but we reconcile it with a higher level singular enterprise understanding, so that when you're on your version that you can easily recognize, you can kind of click through and see, this is where we're moving to, or this is the way the company looks at it. So you get the benefits of unification without the disruption of shoehorning.
Yeah, and I don't want to say it's necessarily better, because we've had this argument with a lot of different, not argument, but like discussion with a lot of different customers and whatnot. And again, this is it comes back to like there's not one approach to solve that particular problem. There's multiple approaches, and a lot of customers that we have aren't ready from a business operations standpoint, from a logistics standpoint, internally, to make the golden record decision. And that's the biggest heartache with any of these multi-org integrations, with any of these, like not even multi-Salesforce org integrations, but
Just
any of these multi-system integrations, the data lake golden record, not just data lake itself, right? But the data lake golden record piece is a contentious discussion because you need institutional buy-in, and people forget that. And people don't understand data that is or is not important to their department, to their team, to their division, isn't necessarily, those values aren't necessarily held throughout the organization, and throughout subsidiary organizations that are acquired, or larger organizations that you're integrating with. Like anyone who's gone through a mergers and acquisition process, whether you've been on the bigger company that's buying or the smaller company that's being bought, like it's often very disruptive because they're like, we just got to slam these two systems together and figure it out. Like you're using Dynamics, I'm using Salesforce, FU, we win. Or we're using Salesforce, you're using Salesforce. They're two totally different like orgs. The business process is not even remotely the same. We're just going to slam them together,
put them together.
And yeah, and you just create a mess, right? And so when we talk about these other tools like Heroku and using Salesforce Connect and Heroku Connect to expose this data and do this stuff, it's not even solving the same problem. It's giving people the opportunity to see what's going on in these other solutions in a way where, again, Salesforce is the hub. It's like the place I want to go to figure out what my business is doing. And you're exposing that there so they can see what's happening without doing any disruption. But it's not necessarily better because it's only one step down towards that path.
It's a buffer or a mediator.
Right. But again, it's like it's a mediator there, but it's also where you can build on, it's something you can build on top of. And it's something that, again, I want Peyton, when this video goes live, we link the other article where we talk about our Better Together series, where Heroku is better together with Data Cloud, or best together with Data Cloud and MuleSoft, because we specifically talk about how these solutions build on top of each other. And depending on you as a business and where you are on that process, you might be ready. You might have a data steward. You might like really understand your data and your subsidiary data or your sister org data or your sister company data, and you want to do this Unify and you're ready to go. And you do have a primary org you operate out of, and Data Cloud's going to be a great fit. You're going to use all those features out of the box, and like you don't need any of this other stuff, right? Like a lot of the stuff we talked about, it's like nice to have, whatnot, and you're going to be the ideal customer for Data Cloud. But if you don't fit into that mold, if you're not that person, if you're not sure, but there are features you think you need there, this is where having that discussion, that nuanced discussion of like, all right, I've got X number of systems. I'm not sure what data needs to win. I don't necessarily even want to use copy fields, or not liberally use copy fields. I don't liberally want to use Data Cloud trigger flows because I don't trust that yet. I don't have a handle on my entire organization's org. How do I get started? And this is where leveraging tools like MuleSoft, like Heroku's databases, like their applications you can build on top of it, like Salesforce core fundamental automation, utilizing some of those stuff and other things that you're already familiar with is okay, in addition to starting to go down the path of exploring, is Data Cloud a right fit? And I think that is like the key here, is that I feel like there's been, and again, like Salesforce can hate me, but I feel like they really misstepped here, where they really treated it as a cure-all, a magic elixir of solving your data problems. And I think people fundamentally misunderstand when you go into these projects, when you go into these problems that you're trying to solve, it's not necessarily just a technology problem. Like Snowflake could work just fine. Data Cloud has some features that are really good if you also have Salesforce. But regardless, if maybe the customer already has Snowflake, and you're trying to pitch Data Cloud, or you're looking like maybe I should retire that Snowflake for Data Cloud, or maybe I use both of them. But half the time, that's not even the question you're trying to answer. It's like half the time when we get involved trying to do these projects, Justin, how many times it's like, all right, well, who's in charge of this data? I'm like, and you're like, you get that stone cold silence. And I'm like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, listen, guys, you're asking us, like, we want one golden record. We want to merge all this stuff. We want to make it pretty. We want all the AIs and automation. We're like, okay,
that's gold.
Yeah, it's like, that's great. And it's like, okay, so who should win when this case comes up, when your subsidiary pushes an account over to you and they're like, this is our world, this is our ground truth, we know this is accurate, and the team over there 100% believes that, and they want to blow over your data. Do you blow over your data? And you're like, well, I don't know. Like, it's half the time the answer, like, we don't know. We got to look at, maybe it's a case-by-case basis. Oh, maybe we got to do some deduplication first. Maybe they've got garbage. Like, there's so many of those maybe what ifs, like, that expand out and make this epically more complicated. But it's not even from a tech standpoint. It's from a, hey, how do we want to handle this? Because sometimes there's not even a wrong answer. It's like, maybe we want to blow over it or don't. And both of them are viable depending on where the business wants to go. And I think that's the thing. I think that's the thing that people really just like, this is where Salesforce, like, I feel always gets itself in trouble, is because it's so easy to customize. You don't need to write code. You don't need to talk to freaking nerds like us to like get yourself into trouble. Like, you're I'm going to click some buttons. I'm going to do some automation. I'm going to do some copy fields. And why is my bill $10,000? It's like, what did I do wrong? I don't understand. Or why did I just blow through all my API limits? Somebody help. And I think that's the thing that people like, you just get Data Cloud. Have got a data lake. Salesforce has a data lake now. We're fantastic. We're ready to go. That's it. And you're like, whoa.
You gotta have a conceptual understanding of what your business's system landscape needs to be. And this goes to like the weakness of use case based selling is because when you boil any company down, like, take out its industry or vertical specifics and just talk about, like, what does a business do? You know, they get customers, they build relationships, they sell to those relationships, they fulfill on those sales, and then they collect payment on those fulfillments. Whether it's a SaaS with a subscription, whether it's widgets, whatever you do, you need to have those things. And so at its most fundamental layer, to have a comprehensive and effective IT landscape, you need to have a horizontal understanding of those needs. Like, I need CRM. I need a data lake to hold data for trend analysis and for aggregation and enrichment so that my CRM is fueled with amazing data. I need an application to deliver my service or to interact with my customer base. So I need an application hosting platform. And people get caught up in call it like the specific features that make each offering unique from its competing offerings. And they forget about, if you boil it down, it's like, okay, it's undisputed that Salesforce is the market leading CRM, like, period. It's just a given. Like, you look at any report, by and far. I'm not even going to entertain the discussion. We're going to leave it at that. So since sales is also perhaps the most critical business challenge that any company faces, and Mike, you and I know this personally, like, driving your pipeline, that's your lifeblood. So regardless of what you do, having a source of new business or recurring business is essential. So let's say CRM is the most important part of every business, period, because you need to source new business or you need to maintain it and you need to get recurring business. So you're going to go with the best solution. Boom. Your decision for Salesforce has been made, as long as you can afford it. So now when you say that, it's like, all right, why would I use Data Cloud over Snowflake? The CRM enrichment capabilities for Data Cloud are better than any other data lake on the market because it's made and owned by the same people, and they've leaned into this. That is their market differentiator. So you're like, I need a data lake for this long-term data storage. Boom, I'm doing that. Okay, I'm going to build my product that is either a SaaS or it's a community interface. That might be an Experience Cloud community, or you might be building something custom. You're like, okay, well, why wouldn't I buy AWS? You'd buy Heroku because Heroku is AWS. It's got proprietary integrations with Salesforce, and it's got proprietary integrations with Data Cloud. And all the data you're aggregating in Data Cloud, you're like, oh, hey, CRM enrichment back into Salesforce. Heroku Connect back into Heroku, surface those insights, that AI enrichment and enablement back into your customer or partner facing experiences on Heroku, whatever custom pieces. Same thing for your comprehensive integration network with MuleSoft. Like, first off, MuleSoft's kind of one of a kind. There's no other integration platform that thinks about integrations quite the way MuleSoft does. And I'm a little in love with it, I'll admit it. But like, all of these things are designed to play together. So like, when you look at each individual piece, you're like, okay, I'm buying Data Cloud not because of a data problem or whatever, blah, blah, blah. You're like, I've identified I need a data lake. And now I'm comparing data lakes. I already use Salesforce. Data Cloud is the best data lake. I need an application platform. I'm buying Heroku because I need an application platform, and it's the best application platform for Data Cloud and Salesforce. So when you understand the problem space you're operating in, it already somewhat focuses you in on the product you're looking at. Heroku is not a data lake. Data Cloud is not an application platform. Salesforce is neither of those things. It's a business application platform, but there's a bit of an asterisk on what a business application is versus a customer-facing app. So if you break down your understanding of your own business into its most fundamental concepts, then you start seeing, okay, these are the products that I should be looking at in the ecosystem, and I'm buying them together because the value proposition of buying them all together is how closely they connect and how well they work together. And this is why, you know, I've gotten on a bit of a soapbox here, but like, when we see like people competing, like sales competing, like, should it be Heroku or Data Cloud, or should it be this or that? It's like, no, like, somewhere you're selling across a business domain. Like, you're selling a data lake solution into an application platform solution, or vice versa. And you shouldn't be. You should be selling these things together and understanding the space that each one wants to target. Because I can tell you, with these monthly feature releases, Salesforce is going to get better and better and better at integrating Data Cloud into their core Sales Cloud, Service Cloud offerings. And you're going to be able to do more. You're going to get more cross-org exposure. And so integrations between the Salesforce orgs might not be quite so critical if you've got Data Cloud there. But if you understand that the mission statement of Data Cloud is easily aggregate data from any system I can think of and surface that data into any of my Salesforce orgs, that's the boundary. Then the distribution problem is, how do I go beyond the Salesforce orgs? Okay, right. That's why I need MuleSoft. The application problems, that's like, what am I going to do with all this awesome data that I've collected? How am I going to make my SaaS better? How am I going to whatever? You build your SaaS on Heroku. So all these insights, all this aggregated data that's in your Data Cloud and in your Sales and Service Cloud, that can just funnel right into your app. Like, when you get that, some of these discussions become much easier to have, and they don't require such a granular understanding when you bring it down to its fundamental concepts. And I'll put a sock in it there.
Yeah, no, and I think that was a good, I think it's a good ending note. I mean, I hope people who have tuned in and will watch this later feel that we've done at least Data Cloud some justice and demystified it a bit here, where it fits, where it doesn't fit. And again, I encourage you guys, like, if you guys find this useful, to take a look at our Better Together series with MuleSoft Heroku, MuleSoft Data Cloud, or sorry, Heroku Data Cloud and Heroku MuleSoft and Data Cloud, how they all work together. And obviously implied with that is always Salesforce CRM as part of it, because that's what we're focused on. So that you guys could get a better understanding of where and when these tools really matter, and why Data Cloud is what it is, what it really isn't, and what you guys should really think about. And I think, Justin, to just like really harp on that, is that when you're looking at Data Cloud, if you're in that box of data aggregation and CRM, and you're inside that box and you're distributing inside your CRM box, like, that is a great use case. When you go out of there, like, you need to start looking at Heroku for staging data or building applications that leverage that data to help do, you know, some of its own capture, not even enrichment, but capture to bring back to Data Cloud. Yeah. And MuleSoft to build a web of integrations to integrate to that application, potentially to your other downstream systems, and then by extension to your Data Cloud. And I think that's the thing that, like, if you guys are looking at more complicated. It's not the only way. Again, too, like the other thing too to finally come off is that if you're looking at getting a data cloud, or you're looking at getting if you're looking at buying data cloud and you already have integration set up, those are still valid. Like they're not necessary. Like some of them could be retired. Like that's where you would hire an expert to come in and, we'll plug ourselves. Like, hey, we'll do a health check, take a look, and see if there's some optimizations, but they're still valid by their own documentation. And just because you buy this thing doesn't mean it invalidates, decades of IT theory and patterns, right? Like, it's like this, it is a powerful tool. It enhances capabilities, but it doesn't necessarily completely eliminate the need for doing some of this other work. And I think other than that, Justin, I'll give you a final word since you wrote this. Like, is there anything else we haven't covered about Data Cloud, or anything that you want to say to make sure that we hit on before we take a break?
I think we've covered all of it. If I can just nutshell this entire session, if we're going to soundbite this, Data Cloud should be positioned against Snowflake. Like if you're thinking about Data Cloud, you're thinking about data lakes, you're thinking about Snowflake. And the reason why Data Cloud over Snowflake or something else is the CRM enrichment. Like, that's the unique thing. Any data lake in general is going to try and build as many tools as possible to aggregate data. And they're all competing at face value there in terms of who's got direct connections to the tools you're using, who's got the most connections to get it in, because that's a data lakes game. How do we get the water in the lake? What Salesforce did, that's like, this is why we are different from any other data lake on the market, is like, well, we were a CRM first company, our data lake's going to be a CRM first data lake. So because distribution is never the primary concern of a data lake, having even targeted distribution back into your CRM, that is a unique selling point. So Data Cloud is a competitive data lake that competes specifically on its CRM accessibility functionalities. And if you look at it that way, you're going to be one of those people that ends up picking up Data Cloud, has one of these amazing experiences with it rather than some of the frustrating stories that we've heard. And then you take the value that it's driving in your CRM, and you eventually spread that farther with tools like Heroku and MuleSoft. And that's why we keep saying they're best together. So just remember, Data Cloud is a data lake that is uniquely accessible to your Salesforce CRM in a way that no other data lake on the market is.
Awesome.
And if you remember that, then you've got a good grounding in where to start.
I think that's a great place to end on. Justin, I appreciate your time and doing the research. Again, if you guys are interested in learning more, we'll have this article posted along with the rest of the ones in the top pinned comments on YouTube. And as well, if you guys are interested in diving deeper, more than happy to reach out to Peyton. His email should also be attached, or either of us, and we'll be more than happy to go into your specific use case and see if Data Cloud makes sense for you, or how to make it work. So guys, thanks so much. Take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, guys.